Meredith Calloway, 32, stood frozen as her entire family filed into her apartment, their eyes widening at what they discovered. The same people who had mocked her foolish investment and refused her invitations for months were now speechless. Her brother whispered, "You've been living like this while we thought you were struggling." If only they knew that their presence today wasn't a reconciliation, it was the final step in her carefully orchestrated plan. Justice. Before I continue this story of family betrayal and sweet revenge, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and hit that like button if you've ever had to teach your family a hard lesson. Subscribe to join our storytelling community, where karma always comes full circle. Now let's dive deeper into how Meredith's family loyalty was tested and shattered. Meredith came from the seemingly picture-perfect Calloway family of Burlington, Vermont, respected, wealthy, and obsessively concerned with maintaining appearances. Her parents, Richard and Eleanor, had built a successful chain of luxury furniture stores across New England, while her older brother Evan followed dutifully into the family business after graduating from Dartmouth with honors. Her younger sister Penelope was the family darling, beautiful, charismatic, and recently engaged to the son of a prominent local politician. Then there was Meredith, the middle child, who never quite fit the carefully crafted Calloway mold. Where her siblings excelled in business and social graces, Meredith pursued architecture with a passion that her family dismissed as impractical. "Buildings don't care about your last name," her father would say dismissively whenever she shared her designs at family gatherings. Despite their disapproval, she worked her way through a state university architecture program, refusing the family money to maintain her independence. For years, Meredith maintained an uneasy peace with her family, attending the obligatory Sunday dinners, smiling through backhanded compliments, and watching her achievements be minimized while her siblings were celebrated. She had almost grown numb to the constant comparison and subtle digs, until last Christmas when everything changed. The Calloways had gathered at her parents' sprawling Victorian home. The fire crackled in the ornate fireplace as they exchanged extravagant gifts: a Rolex for Evan, a diamond tennis bracelet for Penelope. When it came to Meredith's turn, her father handed her a small envelope with a thin smile. "We thought this would be more practical for you," her mother said, with that familiar condescending tone. Inside was a gift certificate for a financial planning consultation. Not even a gift, a not-so-subtle message that at 32 Meredith was still considered the family failure. "You really need to get your affairs in order," her father added. "We won't be around forever to bail you out." Meredith felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. "I've never asked you for money," she said quietly. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Penelope laughed, flashing her enormous engagement ring. "They're just trying to help you. Not everyone can marry well or have a head for business." That night, alone in her cramped studio apartment, Meredith made a decision. She'd recently been approached by Harrington Developments about a revolutionary sustainable housing project she'd designed in graduate school. They were offering her a chance to lead the architectural team and a substantial signing bonus. She'd been hesitating, worried about taking such a risk. But that night, staring at the insulting gift certificate, she made the call and accepted the position. What her family didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask, was that Meredith had been quietly building her reputation in sustainable architecture circles for years. Her minimalist designs had won several industry awards, and this new position would catapult her career to new heights. 3 months later, Meredith received her first substantial paycheck from Harrington. That same day, she found the perfect apartment, a stunning penthouse in a historic building downtown that she'd always admired. With her signing bonus and excellent credit, she secured a mortgage that same week. Excited about this new chapter, Meredith called her mother to share the news, hoping that perhaps this tangible success might finally earn her family's respect. "Mom, I've got some exciting news. I've bought an apartment." "Oh, Meredith," her mother interrupted with a sigh. "Are you sure that was wise? Property is such a commitment. and in this economy, it's actually a great investment. Meredith continued trying to maintain her enthusiasm. It's in the Westfield building downtown. You know, the historic one with the old textile factory. Isn't that in the struggling part of downtown? Really, Meredith, you should have consulted with your father or Evan before making such a decision. Those old buildings are money pits. It's been completely renovated, and it's actually in the most up and coming. Well, I suppose you've always had to learn things the hard way, her mother said dismissively. Anyway, I should go. Penelope and I are meeting with the wedding planner in an hour. The call ended before Meredith could say anything more. She stood in the empty space of her beautiful new home. 14-foot ceilings, original hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the entire city skyline, and felt the familiar sting of her family's dismissal. The following Sunday at dinner, when she invited everyone to see her new place, the excuses came quickly. Her parents were too busy with the store expansion. Evan had golf tournaments every weekend. Penelope was consumed with wedding planning. Maybe after the wedding, her mother said vaguely. Things are just so hectic right now. Meredith watched as they spent the rest of dinner discussing Penelope's flower arrangements and Evan's new promotion. Not once did anyone ask a single question about her new job or home. That night, driving back to her beautiful empty apartment, Meredith felt something inside her harden. For years, she'd sought their approval, their interest, their respect. And for years, she'd been met with indifference at best, cruel dismissal at worst. As she unlocked the door to her penthouse and looked out at the twinkling city lights below, a plan began to form. If her family couldn't bother to support her now, they would regret it later. The Callaways prized status and appearances above all else, and Meredith was about to use that against them. Little did they know that their middle child, the one they'd overlooked for decades, was about to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives, about the true meaning of family loyalty. The first thing Meredith did was throw herself completely into her new role at Harrington Developments. While her family believed she was struggling with an impulsive apartment purchase, she was actually thriving. Her innovative approach to sustainable luxury living caught the attention of industry publications, and within 6 months, she was featured in Architectural Digest's 40 Under 40 list of rising talents. She kept the magazine hidden when her family dropped by her old studio apartment, which she maintained as a decoy while her penthouse was being renovated. They never stayed long anyway, usually just dropping off holiday obligations or making brief appearances to maintain the pretense of family connection. Still, in this little shoebox, her father had commented during one such visit, glancing around with barely disguised disapproval. "I thought you said you bought a new place." "It's being renovated," Meredith replied, simply not bothering to elaborate. "Well, I hope you didn't overextend yourself," he said, checking his watch impatiently. "The market is unpredictable these days." Meanwhile, Meredith was transforming her penthouse into a showstopper. With her architect's eye and her new connections in the design world, she created a space that was both breathtaking and deeply personal. The open-concept living area featured floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline like a living painting. She installed a custom kitchen that would make professional chefs envious. Her mother had always belittled her cooking abilities, despite Meredith's culinary talents. The master bedroom suite was a sanctuary of calm with an adjoining spa bathroom featuring a Japanese soaking tub and a shower with multiple rainfall heads. She converted one bedroom into a state-of-the-art home office, where her drafting table sat before windows that captured perfect northern light. Another became a guest room that she doubted her family would ever use. Most importantly, she designed a spectacular terrace garden that wrapped around the entire penthouse, a lush private paradise, 17 stories above the city streets. It was the perfect venue for entertaining, with an outdoor kitchen, fireplace, and dining area that could comfortably seat 12. As her home took shape, so did her plan. During one of the obligatory Sunday dinners, Meredith learned that her sister Penelope's wedding venue had fallen through. The historic mansion they'd booked had suffered water damage from a burst pipe, and with only 2 months until the wedding, the family was in crisis mode. "Everything is booked," Penelope wailed. "All the decent venues are taken, and I refuse to get married in some tacky hotel ballroom." "We'll figure something out, princess," their father assured her. "Money can solve any problem." Meredith sat quietly picking at her food as the family brainstormed increasingly desperate solutions. They didn't even think to ask if she might have connections in the architecture world that could help. That night, she made a call to Marcus Harrington himself, her boss, and the developer who had become something of a mentor to her. As she suspected, he was more than happy to offer his company's newest showpiece, a magnificent renovated warehouse with waterfront views, as a replacement venue. The space wasn't even on the market yet as an event venue, which made it exclusive and perfect for the status-conscious Callaways. The following Sunday, Meredith casually mentioned the solution. "I might know of a place for Penelope's wedding," she said during a lull in conversation. Her family looked at her with surprise, as if they'd forgotten she was there. "The Harrington waterfront. It's not officially open for events yet, but I could speak to Marcus about making an exception." The silence that followed was almost comical. Her mother recovered first. "Marcus Harrington. You know Marcus Harrington, I work for him," Meredith replied. "He's my boss." Since when, her father demanded. "Since 8 months ago. I told you I had a new job." The family exchanged glances, clearly reassessing their perception of Meredith. Penelope leaned forward eagerly. "Could you really get us in there? I've seen pictures online, it's stunning." "I could make a call," Meredith said with deliberate casualness. Within days, the venue was secured. Suddenly, Meredith found herself the unexpected family hero. Her phone rang constantly with questions and requests from her mother and sister. Could she get them a discount on catering? Did she know any good florists? Could she use her connections to secure the top wedding photographer in the city who was supposedly booked solid? Meredith helped with it all, leveraging the relationships she'd built in her professional life. With each favor, she saw her family's perception of her shifting. They weren't impressed by her accomplishments, they were impressed by what her accomplishments could do for them. And that distinction became the foundation of her plan. As Penelope's wedding approached, Meredith continued to maintain the fiction that she was still living in her old studio. She attended fittings and tastings, offered suggestions that were suddenly valued, and watched as her family began to treat her with a new kind of respect, the respect of utility. 2 weeks before the wedding, Meredith learned from Evan that their parents were planning to sell the family furniture business. A large retail conglomerate had made an offer that was too good to refuse, and they were keeping it quiet until after Penelope's wedding. "Don't mention it to anyone," Evan cautioned. "Especially not to Penelope, you know how dramatic she gets. We don't want anything overshadowing her big day." Meredith nodded, filing away this information. "What will you do?" she asked. "Will you still have a position with the new owners?" Evan smirked. "Better. Dad negotiated executive positions for both of us. I'll be regional director, and Dad will be senior consultant until he's ready to retire completely." "That's wonderful," Meredith said, noticing that there had never been any thought of including her in these arrangements. "It's what happens when you stick with the family business," Evan said pointedly. "Loyalty pays off." The irony wasn't lost on Meredith. Loyalty, the very thing her family had never shown her. The final piece of her plan fell into place when she learned that her parents had invited Marcus Harrington to the wedding as a thank you for the venue. Meredith knew that her boss was bringing several potential investors to the event, wealthy individuals interested in the company's upcoming projects. The stage was set. After years of dismissal and disrespect, the Callaways were about to discover exactly what they had been missing and what it would cost them. Penelope's wedding day arrived bathed in perfect late September sunshine. The Harrington waterfront venue was transformed into a fairy tale setting, with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and sheer draperies that billowed gently in the breeze coming off the water. Meredith arrived early to ensure everything was in place both for the ceremony and for what would come after. As the family's designated liaison with the venue staff, she moved efficiently through the space-checking details and making last-minute adjustments. Her mother approached resplendent in a custom designer gown of pale blue silk. "Meredith, I must say you've been surprisingly helpful with all this," Eleanor said, her tone suggesting she was bestowing a great compliment. "I had no idea you had such useful connections." "I'm full of surprises," Meredith replied, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, well, I should tell you that Marcus Harrington has been singing your praises to your father. Apparently, you're quite the rising star in his company." Her mother adjusted her diamond earrings. "Your father is quite impressed. Perhaps this architecture thing wasn't such a frivolous choice after all." "How validating," Meredith said dryly, but her mother missed the sarcasm. "Indeed. Now, where have you seated the Harrington party? Your father wants to make sure they're properly accommodated." Meredith showed her the seating chart. "They're at table 1 with you and Dad. I thought that would be appropriate." "Perfect. And where are you seated?" "Table 6 with the cousins." Her mother nodded absently, already moving on to the next item on her mental checklist. Meredith watched her go, knowing that by evening's end their dynamic would be forever altered. The ceremony was flawless. Penelope was a vision in her designer gown, and the exchange of vows went off without a hitch. As guests moved to the reception area, Meredith circulated, playing the dutiful daughter and sister, while keeping an eye on Marcus Harrington and his group of investors. During the father-daughter dance, she slipped outside to make a phone call. When she returned, the party was in full swing. Her father was deep in conversation with Marcus and two distinguished-looking men at the head table. She could read Richard Calloway's body language even from across the room, the slightly forward lean, the animated hand gestures, the practiced laugh. He was in full sales mode. Meredith approached just as dessert was being served. "Ah, here she is," Marcus exclaimed, rising to greet her with genuine warmth. "The brilliant mind I was just telling you about. Gentlemen, this is Meredith Calloway, the architect leading our Westside Sustainable Community Project." The investors regarded her with new interest as her father looked on with barely concealed surprise. "Your daughter is a remarkable talent," one of the men said to Richard. "That model apartment she designed has convinced me that this project is worth every penny of my investment." "Model apartment," Richard echoed, looking confused. Marcus turned to him in surprise. "You haven't seen it, I assumed, since it was family." The penthouse in the Westfield building is Meredith's design showcase for the project. "It's extraordinary. We've already had 3 potential buyers request the exact same specifications for their units at premium prices." Richard's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally a strained attempt at pride. "Of course, yes, Meredith's penthouse. She's been quite modest about it." The conversation continued with the investors asking Meredith detailed questions about her design philosophy and vision for the project. She answered with confidence and passion, aware of her father's growing discomfort. By the time the exchange concluded, it was clear to everyone at the table which Calloway was commanding the real respect in the room. As the investors moved away to mingle, Richard turned to his daughter with narrowed eyes. "You live in a penthouse. In the Westfield building I tried to tell you," Meredith said calmly. "Multiple times, actually. And it's some kind of model home for Harrington's projects." "It's my home," she corrected. "But yes, I designed it as a showcase of sustainable luxury living. The company liked it so much they're using it to attract investors and high-end buyers." Before her father could respond, the DJ announced it was time for toasts. Meredith moved away, leaving Richard stunned and reassessing everything he thought he knew about his middle child. Later, as the evening was winding down, Meredith found herself cornered by her entire immediate family near the dessert table. Her mother's smile was brittle, her father's gaze calculating. Even Evan looked at her differently, while Penelope, slightly tipsy from champagne, was the most direct. "Why didn't you tell us you were some hotshot architect living in a fancy penthouse?" her sister demanded. "I did tell you," Meredith replied. "None of you bothered to listen. You said you bought an apartment," her mother countered defensively. "You never mentioned it was a penthouse, or that it was some showcase for millionaire investors. I invited all of you to see it. Multiple times. You were always too busy." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group as this truth sank in. Richard cleared his throat. "Well, we'd certainly like to see it now," he said, his businessman's smile firmly in place. "Perhaps next Sunday after dinner. I'm sure we'd all love a tour." Meredith could read between the lines. Her father had just discovered she had connections to wealthy investors who might be useful for his next venture after selling the family business. Suddenly, her apartment wasn't a foolish investment but a networking opportunity. "I'm afraid I'll be out of town next Sunday," she said pleasantly. Work trip to present, at a sustainable design conference in Chicago. The weekend after then, her mother pressed. Meredith pretended to check her calendar on her phone. "That might work. I'll have to confirm once I'm back from Chicago." As the evening drew to a close, Meredith watched her family interact with the Harrington party with new eagerness. Her parents, who had barely acknowledged her career choice for years, were now dropping her name into conversations and claiming pride in her accomplishments, as if they'd supported her all along. It was exactly what she had anticipated, and precisely what she needed for the next phase of her plan. On her way out, Marcus caught her arm. "Phenomenal wedding. Your family must be thrilled with how it turned out." "They are," Meredith agreed. "And thank you again for making it happen." "Not at all. After everything you've done for the company, it was the least I could do." He lowered his voice. "The investors were impressed tonight, especially with your family connections. Having such a respected business family behind our projects adds another layer of credibility." Meredith smiled. "Yes, family connections are valuable, aren't they? Speaking of which, are we still on for the dinner at your place next Friday? The Osaka group is flying in specifically to see the penthouse before committing to their investment." "Absolutely, everything's ready." As she drove home that night, Meredith felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction at seeing the first phase of her plan unfold successfully, anger at how quickly her family's treatment of her had changed once they realized she might be useful to them, and a certain sadness that it had come to this, that the people who should have supported her unconditionally only valued her when they discovered others did. But she pushed the sadness aside. The Callaways had made their choices for years. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. 5 days after the wedding, Meredith's phone rang while she was reviewing plans in her home office. Her father's name flashed on the screen, an unusual occurrence that would have once sent her heart racing with hope. Now she answered with cool composure. "Dad, this is a surprise." Meredith Richards' voice was warm with a friendliness she hadn't heard directed at her in years. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just reviewing some designs for the Chicago presentation," she replied, leaning back in her ergonomic chair and gazing out at the spectacular view from her office windows. "Ah yes, your mother mentioned you'd be traveling. Very impressive being asked to present at such an important conference." Meredith said nothing, waiting for him to get to the real reason for his call. "Listen, I was hoping we might grab lunch today. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Business-related." "Business-related," she repeated. "What kind of business?" There was a slight pause. "Well, as you may know, we're making some changes with Callaway Furnishings. I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. Are you free at noon? The Capitol Grill downtown." Meredith checked her watch. It was exactly the opening she'd been anticipating. "I can make that work." "Excellent, I'll see you then." 3 hours later, Meredith sat across from her father in the dimly lit steakhouse, watching him cut precisely into his medium-rare porterhouse. He'd spent the first 20 minutes of their lunch making uncharacteristically interested inquiries about her work, her apartment, her relationship with Marcus Harrington. She'd provided just enough information to keep him intrigued, without revealing anything substantial. Finally, he set down his knife and fork and dabbed at his mouth with his napkin. Meredith, I've been doing some thinking since Penelope's wedding. Perhaps your mother and I, haven't been as supportive of your career choices as we could have been. She took a sip of her water. That's quite an understatement. To her surprise, he didn't bristle at her directness. Instead, he nodded slowly. Fair enough. We didn't understand the world of architecture and design. It seemed impractical. And now I see that you've built something impressive. Those investors at the wedding, the Hansen Group particularly, they spoke very highly of your work. They're considering a significant investment in our West Side project, Meredith confirmed. Richard's eyes lit up with interest. Yes, about that. I've been looking into Harrington developments. Very impressive growth trajectory. The sustainable luxury market is positioned to explode in the next few years. It is, Meredith agreed, already knowing where this conversation was heading. As it happens, her father continued, I've recently found myself in a position to diversify some investments. With the furniture business changing hands, I'll have significant capital to deploy. I heard about the sale, Meredith said. Congratulations. Richard looked momentarily surprised, then nodded. Evan mentioned it, I suppose. Yes, it's a good deal all around. The point is, I'm looking for new opportunities, and I wondered if there might be a way to invest in your project. Perhaps you could arrange a meeting with Harrington, and there it was, exactly what she'd expected. Not an apology for years of dismissal. Not genuine interest in her accomplishments. But an opportunity to profit from her success. Actually, Meredith said carefully, there might be something even more interesting on the horizon. Richard leaned forward, his eyes sharpening with interest. Marcus is preparing to announce a new development, a luxury eco-resort on the coast. Very exclusive, very high-end. The initial investment round is by invitation only. Her father's expression was almost comical in its sudden intensity. And you could secure an invitation. Possibly, she said. Marcus values my input on potential investors. But it would be unusual to recommend family without a prior relationship with the company. But not impossible, he pressed. Not impossible, she conceded. The minimum buy-in is significant though. And the initial presentation to invited investors is next Friday. Next Friday, her father frowned. That's when you're hosting that dinner you mentioned at the wedding. Meredith smiled. Yes, the dinner is the presentation. At my apartment. She watched as understanding dawned on her father's face. You're hosting the investment presentation. At your home, the penthouse is a showcase for what Harrington can deliver. It makes a compelling statement to potential investors. Richard was already pulling out his phone. I'll clear my calendar. Your mother will want to attend as well, of course. It's not that simple, Meredith said. As I mentioned, it's by invitation only. The guest list was finalized weeks ago. Her father's expression hardened slightly, the businessman emerging. Surely you can add 2 more people. We're your parents after all. I'll speak with Marcus, she said, knowing she was setting the hook perfectly. But I can't promise anything. These investors are flying in from Japan specifically for this presentation. Everything has been carefully orchestrated. I understand, Richard said, though his tone suggested he expected her to make it happen regardless. In the meantime, perhaps we could see your apartment before then. Get a sense of what Harrington can deliver. As you put it, I'm preparing for the Chicago trip this week, Meredith replied smoothly. But I'll check my schedule and let you know. As they finished their lunch, her father insisted on paying, brushing aside her offer to split the bill with a magnanimous wave. Absolutely not. It's the least I can do for my successful daughter. The words would have once meant everything to her. Now they rang hollow. Outside the restaurant, Richard placed a hand on her shoulder, an unusual gesture from a man who rarely showed physical affection. "I want you to know I'm proud of you, Meredith. You've proven yourself in a competitive field on your own terms. That takes real Callaway determination." "Thank you," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "That means a lot coming from you." And in a way it did not, because she still craved his approval, but because it confirmed what she'd always suspected. Richard Callaway's respect wasn't based on love or genuine pride in his children. It was based on utility and profit potential. She wasn't more impressive or talented now than she had been last month or last year. The only thing that had changed was his perception of what she could do for him. As she walked back to her office, Meredith made 2 calls. The first was to Marcus Harrington, confirming that everything was on track for Friday's presentation dinner. The second was to her mother, who answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Meredith, I was just thinking about you." "How was lunch with your father?" "Enlightening," Meredith replied. "He mentioned you might both be interested in attending the investment presentation at my place on Friday." Oh yes, her mother's enthusiasm was palpable. "We're both very interested in supporting your work, dear. And your father thinks this resort project sounds like a marvelous investment." "I've spoken with Marcus." Meredith lied smoothly. "He's agreed to add you to the guest list, but it was difficult. The investors from Osaka are very particular." "We understand completely. We'll be on our absolute best behavior." "Good," Meredith said. "And Mom, Evan, and Penelope should come too. It's important to me to have the whole family there." "Of course, darling. We'll all be there to support you." As Meredith ended the call, she felt a twinge of something, not quite regret but acknowledgement of the line she was crossing. The Callaways had shown their true colors for years. Now they would see hers. "I know this story of family betrayal and calculated revenge is getting intense. If you're enjoying this twisting tale of karma, hit that like button to let me know. I'm absolutely loving reading your comments about similar family dramas you've experienced. What would you do in Meredith's position right now? Would you follow through with her plan, or try to reconcile? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories where justice is served cold. Now, let's continue with what happens when the Callaways finally see Meredith's stunning apartment and learn what opportunity awaits. Friday evening arrived with a light autumn rain that made the city lights blur and shimmer beneath Meredith's penthouse windows. She moved through her space with practiced ease, making final adjustments to the elaborate tablescape she'd created for 12 guests. Crystal glasses caught the light from the modern chandelier overhead, and the finest porcelain plates, a special order from an artisan in Japan, were set precisely on custom placemats. The caterers worked quietly in her kitchen, preparing a 7-course tasting menu featuring sustainable ingredients sourced from local farms. In the background, a carefully curated playlist of ambient music filled the space at just the right volume, present but not intrusive. At precisely 6:45, 15 minutes before the official start time, her doorbell rang. Meredith smoothed her black designer dress and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror before opening the door. As expected, it was her family, all 5 of them, including Penelope's new husband, arriving early to scope out the apartment before the other guests arrived. "We thought we'd come a bit early to help you set up," her mother said, already stepping past her into the foyer, her eyes widening as she took in the soaring ceilings and museum-quality art on the walls. "Everything's already set up," Meredith replied, stepping back to allow them entry. "But please come in." The collective intake of breath as they moved into the main living space was exactly what she'd anticipated. Her father stopped short, causing Evan to bump into him from behind. Penelope let out an audible gasp. "My God, Meredith," her mother whispered. "This is extraordinary." The penthouse was truly stunning in the evening light. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the rain-slicked city below, while the interior glowed with warm lighting that highlighted the perfect balance of textures and materials throughout the space. Custom furniture pieces, ironically, none from Callaway Furnishings, created conversation areas that were both elegant and inviting. The open concept design allowed views straight through to the terrace garden, where lights twinkled among the carefully tended plants despite the light rain. "You designed all this?" Evan asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Every square inch," Meredith confirmed. "From the structural changes to the furniture selection." Her father moved to the windows, looking out at the impressive view. "And this is what sold the investors on the West Side project. This is what got us the Hansen Group investment." "Yes," she said. "They toured the apartment last month and signed the paperwork the next day." "The Hansen Group," Richard repeated, turning to face her with new calculation in his eyes. "A $15 million investment, if what I've heard is correct." Meredith nodded. "Marcus was impressed that you knew the figure. He mentioned you'd been doing your homework on Harrington developments." "Always best to be prepared," her father said with a slight smile. "Particularly when considering a significant investment." "Would anyone like a tour before the other guests arrive?" Meredith offered. For the next 10 minutes, she led her family through the penthouse, watching their expressions shift from amazement to envy to poorly disguised calculation as they mentally assessed the value of everything they saw. Her mother lingered in the spa-like master bathroom with its heated floors and Japanese soaking tub. Evan examined the smart home features that controlled everything from lighting to temperature with voice commands. Penelope couldn't tear herself away from the terrace garden. "This must have cost a fortune," her sister said, running her hand along the custom outdoor kitchen counter. "The company covered some of the upgrades since it serves as a showcase," Meredith explained. "But the property itself was a good investment. It's already appreciated nearly 20% since I bought it." 20%, her father exclaimed. "In this market, sustainable luxury is a growing sector," Meredith said, echoing his words from their lunch. "Positioned to explode in the next few years." The doorbell rang again, saving her from further questions. "That will be the other guests. If you'll excuse me." As she moved to answer the door, Meredith caught her mother whispering urgently to her father, who nodded with an impressed expression. The seeds had been planted. The next arrivals were Marcus Harrington and the Japanese investors, 3 elegant, reserved businessmen, accompanied by an interpreter. Meredith greeted them warmly in Japanese, a skill her family had never known she possessed, and introduced them to the Callaways. The slight looks of surprise on her family's faces were satisfying, but she maintained her professional demeanor. The final guests to arrive were the project's lead engineer and his wife, along with the sustainability consultant who had worked closely with Meredith on the eco-friendly aspects of both the penthouse and the larger West Side project. Once everyone was settled with champagne, Marcus raised his glass in a toast. "To Meredith Callaway," he said, "whose vision has not only transformed this space, but is reshaping how we think about luxury living, in harmony with our environment. And to our honored guests from Osaka, who recognize the extraordinary potential of what we're building." The dinner proceeded perfectly according to plan. The Japanese investors were clearly impressed with both the penthouse and the detailed presentation Marcus gave during dessert regarding the eco-resort project. Meredith watched her family throughout the evening, noting how they worked to position themselves advantageously. Her father engaging the lead investor in conversation about return projections, her mother complimenting the interpreter on her dress, before subtly shifting to questions about Japanese investment patterns, Evan dropping casual mentions of the family furniture business, as if it were still their crown jewel, rather than an asset they were divesting. When Marcus opened the formal investment discussion after dinner, Richard Callaway was the first to speak up. "This project aligns perfectly with some investment goals I've been considering," he said, with practiced casualness. "I'd be very interested in discussing buy-in options." Marcus glanced at Meredith, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. We'd certainly welcome your participation, Mr. Calloway. Perhaps we could set a meeting for early next week to discuss the details. Absolutely, Richard agreed eagerly. Monday morning, perfect. Meredith can send you the details. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Meredith could sense her family's reluctance to leave. They lingered, examining details they had missed earlier, asking increasingly specific questions about the project's timeline and investment structure. Finally, when only the Calloways remained, her father approached her directly. "This was quite impressive, Meredith," he said, gesturing to encompass both the apartment and the evening. "You've positioned yourself remarkably well." "Thank you," she replied simply. "I'm curious what kind of return are initial investors looking at for this resort project?" Meredith smiled. "The projections suggest between 18 and 22% annually, once operational, with a significant tax advantage, due to the sustainable elements." Richard's eyes gleamed with interest. "And the minimum buy-in, $2 million for the initial round." Her father nodded thoughtfully. "Very reasonable for this caliber of project. Your mother and I will be prepared to discuss specifics on Monday." As they finally prepared to leave, her mother embraced her, a rare physical gesture. "We're so proud of you, darling," Eleanor said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've truly come into your own." The words might have healed old wounds once. Now, they only confirmed that Meredith's plan was working perfectly. After closing the door behind them, she kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of the expensive whiskey she kept for special occasions. Tomorrow would bring the second phase of her plan. Tonight she would savor the first signs of her family finally valuing her, even if it was only for what they thought she could give them. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Meredith dressed with particular care, selecting a sharply tailored charcoal suit that projected both confidence and authority. She arrived at Harrington Development's downtown offices 30 minutes before her father's scheduled appointment, reviewing her notes one final time with Marcus in the conference room. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, not for the first time. "They're your family." "I'm sure," Meredith replied without hesitation. "And after today they may not be." "Are you still comfortable with the plan?" Marcus nodded. "You're my most valuable team member, and they treated you poorly for years. I'm happy to play my part. Just be prepared for the fallout." "I've been preparing for it my entire life," Meredith said quietly. At precisely 10 o'clock, her parents were shown into the conference room. Their expressions brightened when they saw Meredith, then turned professionally neutral when they spotted Marcus. Richard, Eleanor, Marcus greeted them, standing to shake hands. "Thank you for coming in. Please have a seat." They settled around the gleaming conference table with Meredith and Marcus on one side, her parents on the other. It felt appropriate, the lines being drawn exactly where they had always been, only now Meredith had crossed to the other side. "Before we begin," Richard said, placing a leather portfolio on the table, "I want to express again how impressed we were with the presentation Friday night. The eco-resort concept is precisely the kind of forward-thinking investment we're looking to make." "We're glad to hear it," Marcus replied smoothly. "However, before we discuss investment specifics, Meredith has some information she'd like to share." All eyes turned to her. Meredith opened her tablet and pulled up a document. "As you know, she began the resort project as being developed in phases, with initial investors having preferred access to future opportunities within the Harrington portfolio." Her father nodded eagerly. "Yes, that was a particularly attractive aspect of the offering. What you may not know," Meredith continued, "is that investor candidates undergo a thorough vetting process. Past investment behavior, business ethics, and personal integrity are all carefully evaluated." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her mother's face. "I'm not sure I understand the relevance." "Let me be more direct," Meredith said, her voice perfectly calm. 3 days ago I received some concerning information about Calloway Furnishings." Her father's expression immediately hardened. "What kind of information?" Meredith swiped to a new document on her tablet. Financial records indicating that for the past 5 years, Callaway Furnishings has been sourcing materials from non-sustainable logging operations in protected areas of Indonesia, despite marketing your products as environmentally responsible. The color drained from her father's face. Those records are confidential. How did you? Additionally, Meredith continued as if he hadn't spoken, there appears to be substantial evidence that the company has been misrepresenting labor practices at your Vietnamese manufacturing facilities, claiming fair wage compliance while systematically underpaying workers. This is absurd, her mother interjected. Richard, tell her this is nonsense. But her father remained silent, his jaw working as he stared at Meredith with a mixture of shock and growing anger. Most relevant to our current discussion, Meredith said, turning to face Marcus, is the fact that the Callaways are not actually in a position to invest in the resort project. The sale of their company to Grand Retail Group is contingent on an ongoing investigation being closed without findings. An investigation that, unfortunately for them, has just received anonymous tips about precisely these issues. You did this, Richard said, his voice barely controlled. You're sabotaging your own family's business. I'm ensuring that Harrington Developments partners with ethically sound investors, Meredith corrected. And I'm holding accountable a company that has profited from deception for years. We're your parents, her mother hissed, abandoning all pretense of composure. How dare you, you're business people who happen to be my parents, Meredith replied. And you've made it abundantly clear throughout my life which role takes precedence. Marcus cleared his throat. In light of this information, I'm afraid we won't be able to proceed with any investment discussions. Our company values align very specifically with sustainable and ethical practices. Richard Callaway's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is a setup. You invited us to that dinner, dangled this investment opportunity in front of us all so you could. What, humiliate us, destroy our business? I invited you to see my life, Meredith said quietly. The one you've been too busy to acknowledge for years. The apartment you couldn't be bothered to visit when I first bought it. The career you dismissed until you thought it could benefit you financially. So this is revenge, her mother said, her voice trembling. For what? Not praising you enough, not understanding your artistic aspirations. This is consequences, Meredith corrected. For years of conditional love and selective support. For teaching me that I only mattered when I was useful. She stood gathering her materials. The information about Callaway Furnishings has already been provided to the appropriate regulatory agencies and to Grand Retail Group. What happens next is out of my hands. Her father also rose, his expression thunderous. You'll regret this. When this vendetta of yours costs Evan his future at the company, when it bankrupts the business your grandfather built, you'll regret turning on your own blood. Meredith met his gaze unflinchingly. The only thing I regret is spending so many years seeking approval from people who were never going to give it freely. We're done here, Eleanor snapped, gathering her purse. Come, Richard. As they moved toward the door, Meredith called after them. One more thing, I've purchased controlling interest in the historic Callaway building downtown. Her parents froze, turning slowly to face her. It was for sale, her father asked, genuinely shocked. Everything's for sale at the right price, Meredith replied, echoing words he had spoken countless times throughout her childhood. I'll be converting it into affordable, sustainable housing for artists and creators, people pursuing their impractical dreams, as you used to call them. The symbolism wasn't lost on them. The Callaway building had been the first property her grandfather had purchased when starting the furniture business. It had served as company headquarters until Richard had moved operations to a more prestigious location 10 years ago. You can't do this, her father said, but the words lacked conviction. He was beginning to understand just how thoroughly she had outmaneuvered him. I already have, Meredith replied, simply. The papers were signed last week. After her parents stormed out, Marcus turned to her with a mixture of admiration and concern. That went exactly as you predicted. They're nothing if not consistent, Meredith said, feeling strangely hollow despite having executed her plan perfectly. What now? Marcus asked. They won't take this lying down. Now we proceed with the actual resort project with legitimate investors who share our values. And I finish what I started with the Callaway building renovation. And your family. Meredith looked out the conference room window at the city skyline, her gaze finding the distinctive silhouette of the Westfield building, where her penthouse waited, a space that was truly hers, built on her own terms and own success. They made their choice years ago, she said. Today I finally made mine. 6 months later, Meredith stood on the rooftop garden of the newly renovated Callaway building, now renamed the Foundry Arts Collective. Around her, dozens of artists, designers, and community members mingled, celebrating the grand opening of the affordable housing and studio spaces she had created. The transformation was remarkable, the historic architecture preserved and enhanced, while the interior spaces had been reimagined to foster creativity and collaboration. As she gazed out at the sunset painting the city skyline in shades of gold and pink, she felt a presence beside her. It was Marcus, holding 2 glasses of champagne. To new beginnings, he said, handing her one. New beginnings, she echoed, clinking her glass against his. Have you heard from them at all? He asked after a moment. Meredith shook her head. Not directly. Evan sent a formal cease and desist letter through his attorney, which my lawyers handled. Penelope texted once, asking if I realized what I'd done to the family. My mother tried to call a few weeks ago, but I let it go to voicemail. And the message, something about how I should consider the family legacy before proceeding with this vindictive crusade. Meredith smiled wryly. As if the Callaway legacy was ever going to include me anyway. What about the company investigation? Proceeding as expected. Grand Retail Group pulled out of the acquisition, and several major retailers have dropped Callaway furnishings from their inventory pending the outcome. My father managed to secure enough capital to keep the company afloat for now, but they've had to downsize significantly. Do you regret any of it? Marcus asked, studying her face carefully. Meredith considered the question thoughtfully. I regret that it came to this. I regret that my family couldn't value me for who I am, rather than what I could do for them. But I don't regret holding them accountable or creating something positive from the wreckage. She gestured to the vibrant community around them, young creators who had been given space to pursue their passions in a city where rising costs had threatened to drive artistic expression to the margins. This is my real legacy, she said. Not the Callaway name or furniture empire, but a place where talent is nurtured rather than dismissed if it doesn't fit someone else's narrow definition of success. As the evening progressed, Meredith mingled with the residents and community partners who had helped bring her vision to life. She was deep in conversation with a young architect whose innovative use of reclaimed materials had caught her attention when her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Penelope, the first direct communication from any family member in months. "Excuse me," she said, to the young architect, stepping away to read the message privately. The email was brief, but struck an unexpected note. Meredith, I've been thinking about everything that happened. While I can't claim to understand or agree with your actions, I've come to realize that our family has never given you the respect or recognition you deserved. I'm attending a design conference downtown next weekend, and wondered if you might be willing to meet for coffee, not to negotiate or make demands, just to talk as sisters for once. Penelope. Meredith stared at the screen, conflicting emotions washing over her. Part of her suspected a trap or manipulation, another Callaway business tactic. But another part recognized something genuine in the simple request. As she tucked her phone away and rejoined the celebration, Meredith realized she had achieved everything she'd set out to do. She had built success on her own terms. She had held her family accountable for their actions. She had created something meaningful that would outlast any petty revenge. The question now was whether reconciliation on new equal terms might be possible with at least one member of her family. Not because she needed it or craved their approval any longer, but because she was secure enough in herself to consider it. That night, returning to her penthouse, Meredith stood at the windows looking out at the city lights. The same view she had once hoped would impress her family now simply brought her peace. She had learned the hardest lesson about family loyalty, that sometimes it must be earned rather than freely given, and that self-respect must come before seeking the respect of others. She picked up her phone and composed a reply to Penelope. Coffee next Saturday would be fine. The cafe at the Foundry, 10 a.m. Just us, no lawyers, no parents, no agenda. We'll see where the conversation leads. As she pressed send, Meredith felt the final piece of her old life falling away. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation with some family members or a completely new chapter without them, would be entirely her choice. That freedom, more than any revenge or vindication, was the true victory she had won. What would you do if you were in Meredith's shoes? Would you meet with Penelope, or cut ties completely? This story reminds us that sometimes family can be our greatest challenge, but also that we have the power to define our own worth and create our own legacy. If you enjoyed this tale of sweet revenge and personal empowerment, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories, and share with anyone who might need a reminder that success truly is the best. Revenge. Drop a comment below about a time when someone underestimated you and lived to regret it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into.